Hi there, welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison, and we are on Gen Con TV. I am Peter Adkison, my co-host is Emma Larkins, and our guest today is Doug Ferguson, and we are streaming from Chaldea Studios. On this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games, and I promise you we're going to have some good untold stories in this game, because our guest today does not like to be interviewed, does not like to be on camera, but I have the goods on him, and I told him, no, you got to come be on my show. Doug, thank you for letting me twist your arm.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, you know, will I get the pictures?
Yes, you'll get the pictures back. Yes, you will get the pictures back.
And the negatives?
Some of them. And the negatives. Negatives? What are negatives? We don't have negatives anymore.
You probably have scanned them. They're already all over the web.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I tried to sell them, but nobody wanted them, actually. So what we like to do is we like to go back to pre-Magic slightly, and we want to learn about who Doug Ferguson was before Magic the Gathering, before Wizards of the Coast. Who were Doug then?
Yeah, I think I talk about this from time to time. You know, I've been around for a while, so I remember going to my first game store. It probably was 1977. It was called Rivendell in St. Louis, and I moved to St. Louis from California, and there were a bunch of cool kids that were really smart, and I saw them playing these games, and I'm like, where'd you get those games?
Right.
And you know, one of their friends told me, because those cool kids wouldn't talk to me because I was new. And so I went to Rivendell, and I saw all of these games. You know, Avalon Hill, Metagaming, Task Force, when they were in little Ziploc bags.
Right.
Yeah, it was crazy. Heritage Miniatures, which had the Lord of the Rings license. And they just looked like lumps of metal. You know, it didn't really look like, you know, the level of detail that we have now in casting.
Right.
Yeah, and so I was like very fascinated by this stuff. And I remember my dad telling me that I had my head in the clouds and I would never make any money, you know, with these games.
Right.
And I think that probably was one of the best things he ever said to me, because I was going to prove him wrong.
And I think that's like a recurring theme in your life story. People telling you you can't do something.
Can't do it. It's impossible. And I'm like, I'm not going to buy that.
I'll show you.
I'll show you. Exactly.
I can too jump off that bridge. You just watch.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, flash forward, you know, a few years, and I got, you know, shopping in the shops at the time and everything like that. And I remember the local shop, and I'd always ask for stuff, and they always said they would order it, and they never did.
Huh.
And
like games and comics.
Right.
Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So like if you like Villains and Vigilantes or Champions, or you know, you wanted another module or something like that, you knew it existed.
Right.
But you know, there was no Amazon then.
Right.
You know, so the only way you're going to get anything is if some you know person running a store would order it for you.
Right.
And they just never did. And I thought, well, you know, I think I can do better than that. And foolishly enough, with you know very little money and help from my mom, in 1985, at the age of 23, I opened up the Ravens Loft. And I was taking money in a cigar box, you know, and
the Ravens Loft is a or more of a comic store?
Comic and game store.
Comic and games. So you were
I actually had books too at the time.
Yeah,
but
like novels, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
fantasy, science fiction, you know. And the store was pretty much split down the middle. One side was comics, one side was games. And so it was a very early, you know, time. I'm trying to remember what BattleTech was called the first edition. It wasn't called BattleTech. I remember Talisman coming out, you know, and then going out of print. I could have sold a lot more of Talisman if it just stayed in print.
Oh, the woes of a retailer. I could have sold more.
Could have sold more.
Yeah.
Oh,
and this was
who
in
knew?
St. Louis, is that right?
This was in St. Louis, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I had that store for 9 years, and it was a crazy time. And I learned everything the hard way. And in some ways, you know, oh my God, I might run out of money, you know, but never made a mistake that was fatal.
Right.
You know, to the business.
Yeah.
Who knows about anything else?
All right. So here you are, a retailer in St. Louis, running a game and comic book store, and I think the next chapter of the story is along comes a game called Magic the Gathering. Tell me how this enters the picture, how you hear about it, your earliest sort of experience with Magic.
Yeah, I have
Or
to
Blizzards,
thank.
or-
Yeah, I have to thank other retailers for cluing me in on. There's a bigger world of gaming out there other than the other stores that I'm competing with.
Right.
And so because I went to a Gamma and then I went to a Gen Con.
Now, Gamma being the Game Manufacturers Association trade show, GTS,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah. And I think that year it might have been in Texas or something. I can't,
Okay. Right. It did move around for a while.
Yeah.
It did move around for
Well, it
many.
still moves around, right?
Exactly. So yeah, because of that, going to the shows and talking to the publishers, I got a different perspective on the business, and I started seeing things, directionally, like bigger than what I had in my little microcosm of a store.
Right. Right.
And I wasn't king there either, king of my store and nobody, there.
Yeah.
Especially back then, the publishers did not like talking to retailers much.
Interesting.
And Darren Bromley, who passed last year, the founder of Mayfair Games, used to take us out to dinner, and I'd see the other publishers like sneering at us. What are you doing talking to those retailers?
Which is so odd because it was the only way we could talk to retailers.
Right.
I know. It made absolutely no sense, but there was, you could feel a palpable classism.
Well, because there was the distributors, right? Like,
They were always-
historically, the distributors were supposed to be the filter between the retailers.
Yeah, they were the in-between people. And I mean, back then, and I think that's true to some degree today, is your salesperson was your source of what came out new, and so by going to these shows, I saw what came out new through a different, through a different prism. And I remember in 1993 at Origins, they were, this new company. Well, it wasn't a new company. I knew the company because I sold, your product from before. And
That company being
Wizards of the Coast.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah, and Origins in '93, just to put this all in perspective, in case people don't have their dates memorized, was just on the eve of Magic the Gathering's launch. And in fact, kind of how you define launch is whether that was Origins or Gen Con that year.
Right.
Origins was the first convention where Magic the Gathering was seen by the public.
Right.
We were demoing it. It was a happy accident. We got delivered some first cards off the press literally the day before Origins started.
Okay.
And then Gen Con was when we had a big release with advertising and all that sort of stuff like that. So anyway, the Origin, you were at the show where the first time people were seeing Magic the Gathering in public, and only a day or two after I had seen actual cards printed and and stuff like that. So yes. So what did you see?
Well, what I saw basically was demo tables surrounded by people, and you're like in the concert trying to stand on your tippy toes to look over, and people didn't move, and it looked really cool, and I noted it. I'm like, this is really cool. You need to pay attention to this.
Whatever it is.
Whatever this is, because I never got close enough to actually, handle it.
Well, we didn't have, we only had like one table. We had an end cap, and the table was, and most of the time I was demoing it by myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And Origins is a little more industry focused as well.
Yeah,
like
it's very casual.
Yeah.
It's a very affordable show to do.
Yeah.
For smaller publishers. And I love Origins because it's smaller and it's casual, but I also love it because it supports all aspects of gaming.
Yeah.
You'll see more variety at
I hope
Origins.
you're not implying that Gen Con is not, because we are on Gen Con TV here, and we have a friendly relationship with Origins, but...
Well, I say Gen Con is a little more fan-focused, and it makes sense for Origins, that you're seeing this as a retailer at Origins, and then Gen Con is where it blows up for the fans, and everyone is like...
Well, this is what I used to say about Gen Con at Pokémon all the time. It's Gen Con is the toy fair of the tabletop industry.
Oh, all right.
And so you can't, if you're anybody, you have to be at Gen Con.
Yeah.
I just like to say it's the best 4 days in gaming. Anyway, so let's move on from this spirited debate. Okay, so so you noted it but didn't get a chance to really
Right.
play it at Origin.
Right.
So what's the next thing in the series
Yeah,
here?
about 10 days before Gen Con, I get a call from my salesperson. I think it was Greenfield Hobby Distributors.
Okay.
They're no longer around. Magic killed them. Magic killed a lot of publishers and distributors back then. Look at him look guilty. Murderer! Murderer!
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean it.
Right. So the salesperson calls me up and he says, "Hey, we got this Magic." And I'm like, "Oh, I've been waiting for this." And he says, "So it comes in boosters and decks." And I'm like, "Okay." He says, "How many do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want 2 displays of boosters and 1 display of decks." And he's like,
Displays? Yeah, meaning like a point of purchase display. I guess everybody knows that
so,
part now.
Essentially, I think it was 10 or 12 decks and 36 boosters.
10 and 36, yep.
10 and 36.
36 booster boxes or booster packs?
36 booster packs in a display box.
In a display box,
10
yeah.
starter decks and a display box of starters.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and cards had exploded, in previous years, the last 2 or 3 years. So I actually think you came in on a wave that you didn't even realize that you had come in on, because people were getting fantasy, cards and comic cards and things like that. And so anyway, so that's why I knew it came in displays,
Right.
because I'd been selling other product like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And he said, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "What, sure about what?" And he's like, "Well, everybody's only ordering like 4 boosters and 1 deck."
Again, I can't. As someone who worked retail recently, working at Mox Boarding House, we would sell like hundreds of booster packs a day or like an hour. Like 4 booster. What are you gonna do with 4 booster packs?
It's one thing for a retailer to ask for that, but I remember our initial order from Diamond Comics, which was probably your distributor.
That was
yeah.
one of my, that was one
Or
of my
Cap
distributors.
City. Maybe it was Cap City. It was also distributed back in the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of those two, they ordered something like 2 decks and 10 boost, not displays, right? Like it was just like
you
some
can't even
crazy
make a deck out of 4
order.
boosters.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean, if you get into it, that's how they just ordered what they got orders for,
Yeah.
and blah blah blah. Right
No,
there.
I had at least 7 distributors, to go back to what I said earlier, so I could get my customers what they wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
And believe it or not, especially back then, you never know what you would find on the dusty shelf of somebody's warehouse. Treasure.
So you had even so before Magic, you had 7 distributors that
Yeah.
you ordered from.
Yeah.
Holy cow! Okay.
So
That's crazy.
And those were the ones who hadn't gone out of business.
So yeah, so you okay.
know.
You really were part of the problem. Jumping ahead to the phantom buying story. Anyway, okay, so
Right.
so you ordered.
I ordered more than
More.
everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And I still remember, I kind of actually forgot about it. And then my store manager called in sick. Thank you. I mean, I should actually do something really nice for him for calling in sick that day. So I had to go in and cover for him. And that's when the shipment arrived. And
the day that Magic arrived, you were there.
I was in the
Normally,
store.
you wouldn't bother going into the
I would have
store.
been on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was,
Right.
Tuesday I would have taken the day off.
Ah,
I would have been
see.
at
Okay.
home doing purchasing,
Right. Okay. Got it.
playing
Okay.
Might and Magic.
So Magic. So Magic comes in and.
I open it up and I start looking at the product, and I open up a deck and I start looking at a couple of boosters, and I'm like, this is really cool and interesting. And I read through the rules; they weren't too abysmal. And
That's because they weren't complete.
yeah, and I remember,
laugh.
my customers had been shopping with me for like 8 years.
Right.
And as they came in, I would talk about it, and they're like, "Oh, Doug thinks this is interesting," and they bought it. And I had one customer drive in from Columbia, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours, from St. Louis. He bought the product, went home, opened it up, and then called me and asked me what I had left, which wasn't much. And he drove all the way back to get, a little bit more.
Wow.
And then I was immediately on the phone calling everybody I could think of, trying to find more product. and it was crazy. It was
And this all happens before Gen Con.
all before Gen Con.
Yeah, because
Oh.
what happens? So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so
Interesting.
yeah, so yeah, things moved quickly here, Emma.
Yeah.
So
Couldn't keep up.
Origins happens. We demo, we show the product unexpectedly, have some
Right.
product. We took some orders, some mail orders there. Some product arrives from Cardamundi within the next couple of weeks between Origins and Gen Con,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we ship it out. Really small amount of product. These are all alphas, and it wasn't even anywhere near the full alpha print run. This was just a piece of the alpha print run.
Right.
And throughout the country, there's these little pockets of stories, which is what we're hearing today is like that magical moment when nobody knows what it's like. So what let's live in that moment for a little bit longer. Like, what were people saying about the game that first day? Can you remember, or like, make something up if you have to. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, the first day they thought it was really interesting. It was only after they actually sat down and kind of tried starting to play it and build decks and stuff like that. I mean, people were trying to figure out all sorts of things to do with decks. You know, lions and bears and tigers, oh my, there weren't any tigers. But,
Lions. There's Savannah lions. Yes.
Yeah, there were Savannah lions, and there were bears. But the whole point of the matter is they were all kind of taking their own unique creative take on it. And then they got really excited, even though they're probably really disappointed now that they don't still have those cards. But the Moxes and Black Lotuses, they picked up on pretty quickly that these are pretty cool cards.
Oh my God.
And
turns out.
right. Matter of fact, there was even a collation error on decks once, and every once in a while you would get decks that had multiple rares.
Yeah.
So you might even find a couple of Moxes, and it was stupid. How excited people got when they got the broken deck.
Right.
And they were just randomized decks, so they weren't like today's pre-constructed decks, playable out of the box. They were just random 60 cards.
Oh, like completely random color and.
Well, yeah. So they completely random. Of course, not very few things are completely random, right? But there was a number of cards that were random from each press sheet, and so you had the common press sheet, the uncommon press sheet, and the rare press sheet, and there would be I don't remember the distribution. I think
Scaffrey.
yeah. I think in a booster pack, I think it was 11 commons, 3 uncommons, and 1 rare, if I remember right. It was very close to that.
Yeah.
And so within each of those groups, it would always be that ratio, or supposed to be that ratio of commons, uncommons, or rares. But it would be random as to what cards were in there, and in the beginning it was also lands. Where there was in order to be, we made probably a mistake in the alpha beta realm of we had a rare island, the rare island.
Oh yeah.
Like to try to have some mystery about what the collation scheme was. We had this clever idea of putting an island on the rare sheet. To try and confuse people, perhaps, and it turns out just to have made a lot of people really upset. When they buy a booster pack, they have 1 rare, and that rare is an island, and that turned out to be a mistake.
Right. But I remember, so that was my first Gen Con. We were driving to my first Gen Con in 1993, and I was with another retailer, and the other retailers weren't getting as excited about this product as I was. They thought I was crazy.
Right.
They're like, how much are you buying? I'm like, whatever I can get. And they're like, we don't understand. And I'm like, no, you need to understand. And it was just so different that most of these retailers, and quite honest about it, that's why some of these distributors died, is they couldn't wrap their heads around the concept. It was absolutely like nothing else ever made. And then the viral.
Well, and we weren't really smart enough in the early days to know how to make it understandable for them, to help them figure out. Everybody got caught up in the crazy sort, which we'll get to, allocations and all that sort of stuff like that. Okay, so you're writing with this retailer talking about how.
And he tells me Bob at Liberty Distributors down in Florida, Bob Carty, still has some product. And I couldn't wait to get to a gas station. Back in the days of, no cell phones. And there's a payphone, and I get on the payphone, and I call Bob, hoping he hasn't left for Gen Con yet.
Oh my gosh.
And said, hey, do you still have product? And he says, yes. And he says, how much do you want? I'm like, all that you have. Which I can't remember how much it was, but it wasn't that much. But I got all that I could get. And then, of course, we go to Gen Con, and I see the booth, and there are a lot of people around it, and people are playing at the booth on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, playing, I only thought kids did that, for my Pokemon experience. Well, big kids do that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was actually playing with Lisa Stevens when she had her deck, which must have had 100+ cards in it.
Yeah.
Took her forever to shuffle. It was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
But this is an interesting piece of background about the original origins and then some cards going out, because I think that probably helped with Gen Con. People are saying like, oh, it just came out of nowhere at Gen Con and it really blew up, but having those pockets, like you said, all across the country, and people had gotten their first taste. So that really helped to build up some of that momentum.
We definitely had, because I think I've told the story on the show before about how we didn't have Magic on day 1 of Gen Con. It didn't arrive until the afternoon of day 2.
Right.
We had, there was a group of people who were hanging out at our booth, or checking in at the booth every hour to see if our Magic had arrived yet. But there was this.
They didn't want Taslanta?
Yeah, we always call it Gen Con to launch because we advertise it, market it, and that's when we kind of officially said, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
And you almost didn't have it.
We almost didn't have it. But yeah, we had gone, Kathleen and I had rented a van before Gen Con and driven down the West Coast and had demoed Magic at a whole bunch of stores down the coast. We had organized this whole retail tour, and it was, and so we got to see this live, because we would go to stores where nobody heard about it before. Then we'd go to stores where a couple people had heard about it. And then by the end, the second to last, we added one more after that, but the second to last stop was War Games West on Central in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they had drank the Kool-Aid big time.
Glenn Goddard, probably Glenn Goddard's excitement was one of the reasons why I was paying close attention.
So you knew Glenn Goddard.
I knew Glenn because I bought from War Games West, the distributor, Wayne and Shirley, and Glenn bought the store. I think from them. I think he was managing it, and at some point he bought it.
Yeah. Well, when I showed up there was 70 people there.
Right.
And they had put out a red carpet on the sidewalk, had video cameras. Back in the day when video cameras were not that common, it was, and that was just crazy. It was like, wow, this is bizarre.
And unfortunately, it took a long time for a lot of the hobby retailers to even clue in on the product. So, I mean, I had been selling the product pretty successfully. Matter of fact, I had to allocate my customers to 1 booster a day when supply was short.
Right.
And they'd be like, no, they'd come in and they're like, but why can't I buy more? And I'm like, well, the only way you'll be able to buy any is because I'm allocating 1 booster per day, and I'm not charging you more. Like everybody else is gouging you, for $7-8 a booster, and I'm selling to you, for $2.99, MSRP. And then I had all the printouts from the rule changes and stuff like that. But it was like that a lot up until the first expansion, Arabian Nights.
Right.
And I still remember. I think I ordered 100 displays, which was inconceivable to me on anything ever before.
As a retailer, 100 displays of Arabian Nights.
Nights, and thing is that Glenn Goddard was smarter than I was because he was probably buying 500. So. But, it was St. Louis. And I remember, Wayne and Shirley Godfrey, Stan Sword, my salesperson, said.
These are all the War Games West.
A
distributor based out of Albuquerque.
Yeah. They bought into the Kool-Aid pretty good.
They did.
They got a good allocation because of that.
Yeah.
Later on, that was really important to the biz.
They did.
But the point is that they were offered to air freight it. And I think it was $200 to air freight these 100 displays of boosters. Must have been 10 cases or something
From
like
Albuquerque to St. Louis.
Albuquerque to St. Louis.
Yeah.
And my fellow retailers were looking at me like, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, my customers are really excited. And they're like, but you're going to sell out of it anyway. And I'm like, but you don't understand. My customers are going to be really excited. And I went to the airport at, during rush hour, to pick up the product. And I come back to a store full of people waiting to buy their Arabian Nights.
Oh, gosh.
It was one of the best sales days in the history of my store.
Nice.
Yeah.
It wasn't the only one, but it was one of the best. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
And I continued to talk to retailers who just didn't get it.
Wow. We are like almost halfway through. We could talk. I would love to just sit here and talk about crazy retail stories, but I think we better move into. We don't even have you at Wizards yet, so let's move forward to going from a successful retailer, somebody who was sharp, got on the Magic bus really early and drove it hard. What made you leave all that and come work at Wizards of the Coast?
Well, I mean, retailers will tell you today that tabletop retailing is more of a passion than a paycheck. So if you want to have a very modest to not modest income, some retailers are able to make it big, but especially now. But back then, banks didn't loan you money, and you could only work with what resources you had. And so it was one of those things that through Magic and the networking, I realized or thought I could do more.
Right.
But I didn't have the resources to do it through retail. So I tricked one of my competitors into buying my store. He said, I want to expand my stores, but they won't loan money to people like us. And I said, well, have you ever thought about buying retailers with similar stores to yours? And then 4 weeks later, they were at my door.
Right.
Nice.
But you sold your store just because you knew you wanted to do something more, not to belittle retail, but to do something on a larger scale.
Right.
But you didn't know what that was. It wasn't like you had a job offer from Wizards at this point.
I was pretty sure that Darren Bromley at Mayfair Games would hire me.
Okay.
Right.
Because they thought I was really smart, or did I have them fooled? But I had been seeing, I hit every show after Gen Con that I could go that conceivably, and Wizards of the Coast had a booth at almost every show. And I was talking to Lisa Stevens at RICTA, and I was showing her sales reports and my own experiences. And I remember in May, I get this invitation from Wizards of the Coast. In
May of which year?
May of 1994.
Okay, so this is only like a year. This is
So
less than a year later.
Yeah. So this is right on the eve of Legends coming out.
Yeah,
right
after
so
the Dark.
After before the Dark. Arabian Nights, then
that's right.
Antiquities, and then Legends was summer.
Legends.
So May is.
It was
May
Legends.
Yeah, right around the time of
It was right around the time of Legends. You're right, because the Dark came out right
after Legends.
Yeah.
That was fall.
And so I got this invitation to go to a summit that Peter was having, because Peter was crazy and thought, he had this vision of what the tabletop industry could become. And so he just invited a few, retailers that, had good reputations, distributors, he had his very early staff. I remember Brian Lewis looked like he was barely out of high school.
He was barely out of high school.
I'm like, who's this kid? What do you mean he's a lawyer? And
to think we hired him out of Boeing.
Right. But so we kind of had this summit, and
I remember that was summer '94. We had a lot of distributors and retailers there.
Yeah. And I remember telling Lisa I was selling my store, and she's like, "Why? You're one of our good retailers."
Yeah.
And I said, because I want to do more. And I think somehow, I don't know how it happened behind the scenes, but I had a job interview at that same summit. And I remember I interviewed with Kathleen and other people. And I remember being at dinner with my peers and Kathleen decides to, let the thing out of, oh, he's going to come work for us.
Kathleen Adkison.
Yeah. And
my
I was
first
like,
wife, yes.
and I had this shocked look on my face. I'm like, how dare you tell them, that this is happening, and Luke Mertens was at the table, with me,
From Cardamundi, who was going to be our guest in January.
Yeah.
So they didn't know that you were leaving retail? Is that?
I knew I was in the final stages of closing the deal.
Yeah.
But nobody else had known.
Right.
Nobody else knew, right.
But nobody else knew.
Right.
And so I think I'd have to go back and look at a calendar, but I sold my store on July 2nd or 3rd, and Origins used to be over 4th of July weekend.
Okay,
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. It was in San Jose. And I never heard back from Wizards of the Coast after that meeting. I was sitting there, and I would be calling and leaving voicemails, and I'd be like, my God, I guess this is just not going to happen. Maybe I'll do something in multimedia. That looks interesting. And then I show up at Origins, and I see Lisa Stevens, and she says, why haven't you accepted your job offer? And I'm like, what job offer? So who knows what would have happened if I hadn't gone to Origins?
Right.
Like my entire future would never have happened. That path would have just vanished into the mist.
What happened? Did they send you a letter? Was someone supposed to call you?
They had a miscommunication between HR and the hiring manager and marketing, and so they faxed it, to my hotel, and I saw it, and it was more money than, it was twice as much money, if not more, as what I normally made, and I like, okay, does this look good? And I'm like, yes, please take me.
I love golden handcuffs. They're the best kind of handcuffs. Even better than those felt ones.
And
well, we were a young company. Not all of our operations were smoothed out just yet. But you would help us with that.
Yeah, I was employee number 50. And I think when I left, in the 2000 layoff, I was the 35th surviving Wizards of the Coast employee from the very beginning. Right. Nothing to compare to Charlie Catino, the oldest.
Who's still there, right?
He's still there. Yeah. But yeah, it was absolutely crazy. 2 weeks later, I was.
So what did we hire you to do? What was your job?
I really didn't know. I had absolutely no clue.
Take our money. Join us.
So who did you work for?
I worked for.
Did you know that?
I knew, in the course of things. I think Lisa might have told me. Lisa was kind enough to let me stay at her house. She barely knew me, and she let me stay at her house. While I found a place. And
that's the way it was.
Yeah, Lisa's incredible. And I got told that I was being put in the marketing department. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell marketing is, because you wanted them to know more about the retailers that they sold to, and and I was considered the company's hobby industry expert. Like I knew everybody just because I bought from them, and I knew a lot of the publishers as well.
Yeah, I really felt in those days that the real blind spot for Wizards was that we didn't understand retail. We understood to some extent distributors because we're constantly talking to distributors and dealing with them. We understood something of consumers because we were consumers ourselves, we were gamers ourselves, and we would sell and promote to consumers at conventions all the time, right? But there's like this retail piece of this chain, we don't really understand.
But you didn't really understand the distributors very well at all either. Because I don't know if you remember, in New Orleans, I think it was 1995, we're at dinner with the president of the Armory, and you were on your game, and the president of the Armory is like looking around the table going, wait a minute, I was able to get away with shit. And all of a sudden, Peter seems clued in. And he looks right at me and says, you're the snitch. He called me that in front of everybody at dinner. You're the snitch.
Max, you're talking about Max?
Max, yes.
Yeah,
because I was educating the company on how things worked.
Right. Oh, so you're right. So we all I meant to say is that the retail was a blind spot we knew about, and maybe
Right.
distributors was a blind spot we didn't know
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, but you also had this crazy vision. So you tasked me with this job, and I'm like, you wanted me to figure out how to make game stores more appealing to mom, to normal people.
Okay.
Because game stores had a tendency to be dark and cluttery, and sometimes certain retailers I know didn't vacuum, claimed it was their allergies. And they weren't exactly the kind of places that if you weren't really into it.
Yeah, retail stores of the 80s, early 90s. Yeah, there were some good ones.
Great
There
ones.
were some great ones, some fantastic ones. There were some others that were,
Yeah. And
You're surprised that their mothers would let them go there.
oh yeah. I even made mistakes that I'm like, I look back on now and I'm like, why did you do that? That was just not smart, but we were hobbyists, we didn't think about the big world. We just thought about what we loved.
So do you think you were able to help us understand retail?
The most important
The
way I
comment
helped
from
you-
Max, I guess, says yes.
Well,
but-
the most important thing I helped you with retail was for Fallen Empires, you told the distributors you would print to order.
Yeah, which was a horrible thing to say.
Right.
I will confess that was a big mistake on my part, but you saved it.
I went to the CFO and I talked to everybody I could to listen.
David Lewis at the time.
David Lewis at the
Yeah.
time, yeah. And I said, look, the demand for Magic, it was still insatiable. And I said, you don't understand. I would order 5 to 10 times what I needed so I could get just enough. And then I had my fingers crossed, and I was bullying my distributors, reminding them that I was a long-term customer and I bought a lot of other stuff from them just to get my allocation. And so because
As a retailer,
you
were explaining to him your experience as a retailer and how
Yeah.
allocations would flow down through the system.
how it flowed through the system. And I said, look, I don't know what I would do if I got, if I was ordering 200 displays, I'd probably order 1,500. And what would I do if I actually got 1,500? The product wasn't that good,
This is good. It's not that good. Let's be clear.
Not yet. It was still early.
I think within a few years, it would have all sold out.
It would have all sold out. Yeah, I've had people tell me that I should have hung on to my Fallen Empires because it's selling for more now, and I'm like, yeah, the stock market might have been a little bit better on Fallen Empires, but.
And this was the phantom allocation that you were talking about.
Phantom buying.
Phantom buying, which was
Right.
a phenomena that makes a lot of sense when somebody explains it to you. But we had no idea at Wizards that this was going on until you alerted us to it.
Right.
And I don't think I confess, I think at that moment, because this, of course, David came to me, it still didn't really sink in.
Right.
But,
at least he was smart and asked for a deposit.
Yes, he asked for a deposit.
Now
Yes.
margins for distributors are thin. Maybe maybe they're lucky. At that time they could get 15 points, and so a 15-point deposit, especially on product that they wouldn't be able to sell, is a pretty steep amount of money. And so they all paid their 15%. And then Fallen Empires came out, and there was another thing that made Fallen Empires a little slower mover because that was the perfectly balanced set. That was a set that there weren't broken cards in.
Right.
Right. And so, those two factors combined made that, all of a sudden retailers started, well, the first thing that happened is retailers heard they were going to get allocated because you couldn't print enough, so they were only going to
But
get
we trained them.
10 or 20%.
Right? So if you think about every expansion that happened before that, Arabian Nights, by the time we had the product and shipped it, it was sold out. Antiquities. Which we printed 3 times as much, went from 5 million to 15 million. These numbers are by memory. Hopefully I'm getting them somewhat close. Then Legends was like 35 million cards, and then the Dark was like 65 million cards.
Right.
Each of these sets, by the time we had the product, was sold out, and so people were getting less than they wanted. And so we trained retailers to behave like you did,
Right.
which was to order more product than what they could possibly want from more than one distributor.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, but gamers were doing the same thing. The sophisticated gamers,
Yeah,
the
the
gamers who were very competitive, who really wanted to make sure that they had a full set of cards,
Right.
they were ordering cards from multiple retailers, right? And
Yeah,
so then
well,
you,
especially after how big this Legend set was.
yeah, right. So then you had this happening at all. Yeah.
And you'd get a percentage then. So it was all
Yes.
percentage based. If you ordered, the way allocations worked, like the more you ordered, the more they would give you.
Right.
Or allocate
Right.
towards you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and
everybody in the supply chain was playing the percentage game.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody's playing this game, and we're stuck trying to figure out how to manage this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, what do? We know that everybody is expecting to get allocated, and do we allocate the same for everybody, or do we realize that some distributors are allocating more, are inflating their order more aggressively because they know they're going to get cut, and some other distributor is really just ordering, maybe just padding it a bit, maybe,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And how do you wrestle with these things, right?
Right, and this is actually why Magic put out a lot of distributors out of business, and it wasn't from over ordering. It was from, if I got so much product from you, I'm going to buy a third of my inventory from you as well. And so if they didn't have Magic, they weren't getting the orders that were tagged on to the Magic order.
Yeah.
And because I had to make sure that I looked really good for the sources that I trusted to get me the product, so that they would give me my allocation.
Right.
And so I had to play every angle, just to remind. And because that's the other thing, is they were getting new customers right and left. And the thing about distributors, they're just like all salespeople. Oh, new customers. And well, we'll just divvy everything up smaller so I can keep everybody happy. And you're reminding them, I'm like, wait a minute, why are you letting the new guy have my stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're either giving my stuff or all this other
Oh,
ordering
and we
power
got
to
to
someone else.
we got to take a short aside there, because like I know you have some saw some of this happening, Magic showing up in the oddest places, and
Yeah, well, it wasn't just Magic. What happened is everybody copycatted Magic in that first year. Everybody rushed to market with their own trading card game. It was really the first 2 years, but the problem is most of them were terrible. Really horrible games.
They didn't have Richard Garfield.
No.
Well, it was Emma, you're a game designer.
Yeah.
It's like before you've had a chance to study, a genre,
Right,
right?
right.
People are just throwing together these games, and it turns out trading card games are really hard to design
Yes.
now,
Yeah.
right? And so.
That's why you need engineers
Right.
Yeah.
to make a good product for trading card games.
Right, so there was all these
Engineers,
trading, and so distributors were putting
Math wizards.
If I remember, I think where your story is going is that distributors were taking a line of trading card games, a whole bunch of different trading card
Right.
games, and putting them in places like 7-Eleven or
GameStop,
or
EB or Babbage's or whatever they were called
Babbage's,
back then.
even
Right.
Walmart and Target, and
Right,
Toys
yeah.
R Us,
So,
right?
so they would sell in Magic, and they'd use that to get in the other products.
Right.
And what was happening is in all these retailers, the Magic would sell, and all the other stuff didn't sell. And buyers are really funny people. They have to have performance on every single inch
Right,
of their
right,
space
right.
when you're selling
But
to the mass
it-
market.
yeah,
it's specialty.
Yeah, it wasn't a viable category. It was just a good product. It wasn't a good category.
Yeah.
And
Right.
So,
Right. So
yeah.
and quite honest about it, if it wasn't Star Trek or Magic, nothing really sold. Especially at mass
Not
market.
until Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh came out a few years later.
Right. Exactly. So they were actually doing a lot of damage to the business.
So let's go back to Fallen Empire. So you went in, you got David Lewis, CFO of Wizards, to agree to demanding an upfront payment, and he got me to sign off on it, which is something we'd never do. I was very nervous about it, but we did. I was scared of this phantom buying thing that you were explaining. And
I'm glad I scared you.
Yes. Yes. So what happens next?
So you had that, that first, people were just rabid for Magic. They knew their businesses in their mind depended on them getting products. So when you announced the allocation, for the first wave of Fallen Empires, I remember you told the customer service people that anything to do with retail should go to Doug. Thank you. So they just took the phone calls and just started forwarding retailer calls to me. And I had a day job, and And I remember I came into work and there were over 100 calls in my voicemail box. And these retailers were calling me the most awful things. It wasn't me personally, but the person on the phone. And I'm not going to repeat any of these things. I was like, wow, how did you know? But and I remember, steadfastly trying to call all of them back, and I never got through more than 10% of them because each call took 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. And it was because they were upset, and I knew they were upset because I would have been upset if I had been them.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell them what I had told Stan Sorer at War Games West. He said, I wish I'd convinced Wayne and Shirley of what you said was going to happen, and he wouldn't listen to me.
And they were upset because they got their whole order? Is that what they were upset
No, they were
about?
upset at first because they weren't getting their whole order.
Okay.
And then when they got their whole order and the demand was pretty close to what they got and they had more on order,
right.
That's when they started to panic. Right. And so
they thought they were going to get allocated. So they were upset because they thought they were going to get allocated.
And they
but
did
that
get
was
allocated. Wave one. They got allocated wave one. The problem was
first
wave
wave,
one.
the first shipment of Fallen Empires.
Right. First shipment, but that was enough.
And that was enough. And there was 5 more waves, right? I think
so.
I think there were 6 waves. I remember this part.
It was insane.
And thankfully it was waves. We never had like waves of product, but it was so much product that Cardamonde, our printer, had told us, why we can't send you all this product on day one. We need to stagger it out, and convince us that was a good idea, and it turned out to be. Okay, so
right, and so it's so Wizards of the Coast used to take Christmas break off.
Yes.
And it befuddled everybody because they're like, what do you mean they close on the between Christmas Day and New Year's Day? But they did. And I remember, I think it was Saturday, and I get a call from Wayne and Shirley Godfrey at War Games West saying, we need to meet with Peter now. And since I was the only person that they could find, because, Wizards of the Coast didn't answer their phone.
Of course not. We're on holiday.
That's right. So I managed to, get, they're flying over Christmas break to Seattle to meet with you. And so they're like, this is a really big problem, and we really need to talk about it. So I think Carol might have actually stopped the presses.
It was an interesting Christmas because we were kind of sort of a typical laid back in the holidays sort of thing. It's all the products shipped. It's Christmas. We had never. We'd always had the attitude, well, you bought it, sure, deal with it, right?
Right.
But. So Wayne and Shirley came up, and we sat down with them. I think, I don't remember who all was in them, probably Kathy, probably Carol.
Lisa, I think.
Lisa Stevens. And the fact was that everybody had already, by that point, received more Fallen Empires than what the market was.
Right.
There was a crash, if you will. And with that came this perception of Fallen Empires as being a bad set.
Right.
A well-balanced set, we might say, but if you're not finding those power cards, those cards that you want to really chase, it wasn't a set that people were hungry for. It was a smaller set. And so, we had to, we allowed our distributors to cut, I believe, to just drop the last 2 waves out of the 6, and took extended terms on the rest.
Right.
And so we basically, and I remember thinking and I think it was David Lewis really put it, he says, Peter, you're in a position to bankrupt the entire industry here if you're not careful, right?
Oh,
I mean,
you were.
It was like every distributor is going to go out of business, and trying to get money out of retailers who are going to go out of business, and this isn't what you want.
Yeah, and essentially, just imagine what would have happened to Wizards if there wasn't a deposit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would have,
I mean, they would have just said, huh.
They would have ordered more.
They would just refuse their shipments.
Yeah.
Because most states, until it's on their dock, they don't own it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you would have just had all those cards.
You would have had a lot of cards.
Yeah.
And because people don't realize this, but when your business is blowing up that fast, you don't actually have a lot of capital.
Right.
Like every bit of capital you have is going right back in, trying to keep up with the business.
Yeah, we were still pretty cash strapped. And it wouldn't be until '96 that we really had a treasury.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so where'd you go from there? What else did you do at Wizards?
What is the denouement? We need a little like after this is like the dark night of the soul. Like what good happened?
I mean, things.
And then everything worked out great, right?
Right. Well, things continue to grow. I
mean 90 that was the end of 94.
Yeah.
Right.
95.
We went into 95.
95 was a rough year, recovering from that. But there was a lot of like us telling distributors and retailers, like, okay, listen, we all knew this was going to happen at some point. We all knew that this thing's not going to grow like this forever, right? And so if you just ease back and just look at it like another product, it's the gamers still want to play this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there were speculators who got burned. There were collectors who bought too much or whatever. There were individuals who were upset not because they were gamers, but because they were trying to make a quick buck on the product.
Right.
Like,
There were some distributors who couldn't buy another Mercedes.
Yeah.
But,
so we said this is good news. We got all those people out of here now. All those people have left the room, and now we're back to just a good, solid product line with gamers who love the product. We're going to come out with more sets. I think Ice Age might have been the next expansion.
It was Ice Age. It was a big set.
And it was
Homecoming.
Homelands.
Homelands.
Yeah, but Ice Age was the next set, and Ice Age was a great set. It was a big set. It came out. It was plenty to collect, just like Legends was. I said, listen, it's going to come out and it's going to sell. People love this game and they're going to keep playing the game. Don't worry about it. And people kind of like maybe, there was like, what else you going to do?
Yeah.
Right? And it was correct.
Yeah, and that Ice Age is, by the way, the best argument I ever lost was SCAF was pitching the sales team. Because I think at that time I might have gotten moved to sales, but at some point I got moved to sales.
Right.
But he's pitching the sales team on the pre-release.
Right.
And why they think R&D thinks the pre-release is a great idea.
Yes, the Ice Age pre-release in Toronto, which we've talked about a couple times on this show.
Yeah, and I was in the room saying the retailers are going to hate that. They hate when publishers sell stuff at Gen Con and not to them, first. And I said, you're just going to piss off the retailers and the distributors. And I'm so glad I lost that argument because the pre-release is one of the central principles to trading card games. And it was, that was a good argument to lose.
I think that was actually a better answer to your question. The thing that I think the Ice Age pre-release which was like about 3 months later after this whole Fallen Empires debacle, if memory serves, was like this thing of us showing, hey, there's a new way to think about this game.
Right.
And we're going to get you all in on it because we're going to start doing pre-releases. Everybody can run pre-releases in their stores. Everybody can do what we're doing, but we got to go out and do it by ourselves once. To test it and see how it works and see what it's like. We did. And
I think that's the last time you also thought about changing the card back.
No. We solved that with Arabian Nights. We never went back to that idea.
I thought I heard someone mention it.
There's always somebody talking about something like that, right? But and I think just building on that a little bit more. In fact, we're going to talk about this after Thanksgiving. 2 weeks from now, SCAF's coming back in, and we've talked about what our narratives arc's going to be, and we're going to focus entirely on organized play. This Fallen Empires was the beginning of us pivoting. Out of the wake of Fallen Empires came the pivot to organized play on a whole different level. And we'd always had tournaments and even had a world championship in '94 and so on like that. But going to the Pro Tour program and prize money and all stuff like that.
Beginning of '96.
Yep. The Fallen Empires, so it took us a year to plan that out. So the Fallen Empires debacle was a wake-up call that we really had to pivot and do something completely different with this company. And it was great. Out of these hardships usually comes opportunities, right?
Yeah, I mean that's I got moved to the sales department. I got moved back to marketing, then into sales in '96, and because I wrote the distribution strategies for the company on trying to take us, from mostly a hobby industry distribution system towards selling, servicing. Big retailers, Walmart, Target, specialty retailers, bookstores and game stores.
Only going back and doing it right now, right?
Doing it right.
Yeah.
Right, and not having, someone just selling in junk, using us as a way to get more junk on the shelf that those retailers didn't want. And so, I remember how hard it was to get the sales analytics to justify that. That was like a 100-page document. It was probably the first time anybody had seen the detailed analytics for all their customers. And I remember back then everybody was sort of, you had card shops and you had comic stores and you had game stores. Every once in a while you'd have a feed store. But you had, but they were, you had model shops, and stuff like that. And I'm like, what's a good term for this? And I sat there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to call it the core because it's the core of our business. Right. And so I call that channel the core in that. And that was never meant to be public. And lo and behold, Rick Aarons, made it public, like a year later at a distributor meeting. He uses the term core. And then, of course, that made that, tabletop industry really happy because it made them feel important because they were the core.
Yeah, the core. Of course.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I think tabletop gaming for me is the best way to describe our hobby.
Tabletop gaming. Yeah,
because it involves tabletop play.
I used to always say we used to call it the adventure or hobby games because you play the games like a hobby. But I think tabletop I think has come out as a. So now before we got together, you were worried about cliffhangers.
Oh.
Did we get? Did you have any before we run out of time? Was there any oh my God?
Yeah, mostly the job thing because I saw in the notes. It's and he's like, I didn't get a job offer, and it's just like, what even oh no, because Lisa who was like, why didn't you accept the job? I'm like, why didn't you accept the job? What happened? It sounded like the perfect movement for you.
Right. That's hilarious.
I mean, just. I spent my entire time at Wizards just going with my gut and doing what I thought was necessary to do. And I worked way too many hours. And I was surrounded, especially in 94 and 95, by a bunch of really immature people.
I have aged since then. Yes.
It's really weird to be 32 years old and considered old. And that's what I was when I showed up. I was what do you mean I'm old?
Yeah. So reflecting back on the 90s, I like to end with a couple questions about what you took away and what you left behind. Like what when you think back, what has how has the Wizards experience affected you since then? Well,
I mean, I was able to do stuff that nobody gets to do. You came from Boeing. All the innovation was mostly out of Boeing by the time you showed up. So how do you make this work? How do you make that work? Trying to solve those problems. Those aren't everyday problems for established companies. They've developed a core competency and they know generally how to solve that problem. So everything at Wizards was kind of new. And you had a bunch of entrepreneurs, just flying by the seat of their pants. And then you had a bunch of people who didn't really belong there at some times. And it kind of created this interesting, place to work. But even doing, the chain at the end, I mean, I would never conceive that I've been involved in opening up 50 stores in 2 years. And another.
And you're talking about Wizards of the Coast retail,
Wizards
which
of the
was
Coast retail.
a thing for a couple of years.
Right, and an additional acquisition of the Gamekeeper chain.
Yes.
So we had 100 stores right when Pokémon came out. And I remember how crazy that was. Like nobody opens things up that fast, especially a company that wasn't built for that. I actually did a spreadsheet once to figure out how many people were touching retail at that time. And I'm like, there's outside of the retail group, there's another 100 employees in the company from HR and finance and IT that are all supporting this retail initiative. And it was absolutely crazy. But like I said, it was because you just had to get it done and you just had to figure it out. And you got to do things that you don't get to do normally. And you get to learn lessons that you don't get to learn normally either. And it's kind of crazy. So I mean that to me is the thing that Wizards did for me. I told you once that Wizards of the Coast was like a forge. And, you either became steel or you melted.
Yeah.
And a lot of people melted. And a few of us the number of people that you brought into Seattle who have gone off and started their own companies or want to work for other companies, and the amount of talent that was at Wizards that has gone off and propagated the tabletop industry to new heights.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize how much Wizards of the Coast did that. I mean, you saved TSR.
Well,
So,
we had some help.
yeah. but the point is that the tabletop industry, even though you killed a lot of companies,
To be clear, there was a lot of murder.
is a stronger, more vibrant hobby than it's ever been.
It is. Well, thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
A lot of fun.
I appreciate you coming on the story, getting over your shyness of cameras. You did great.
There were cameras?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Fantastic. Okay. While Doug thinks about that for a moment, yes, I want to say thank you to everybody involved in putting the show together. Emma Larkins for being my co-host, Doug Ferguson, of course, our guest today, Derek Gooders, our producer, and Will Geisler, our technical director. Thanks to Chaldea Studios for the use of the space. Thanks to Gen Con TV for hosting us. And we will be back in 2 weeks. We will not be broadcasting during the week of Thanksgiving, but 2 weeks from now, we will have Scaff Elias back on the show, the first person to come again, because we realized that we just have way too much to talk about. And so Scaff will be back on December 4th, did we decide? 6th? Something like that. It's the first Wednesday in December, whatever the heck that is. But hey, in the meantime, please join us on Fridays at 11 a.m., right, for Table Takes. Is that right? 11 or noon? Did I get that right? Okay, so, and Mondays, 5 p.m. for Brothers Murph Pacific time. Great shows, and thank you once again. Thanks for checking us out.